Good evening, Sarah. I know it's late, but I finally found my paper from back my first ever English class in college, and they made us do the two types of essays that you are working on the praxis. One was informative, and the other was argumentative, which was considered the easiest to do because most everyone has an opinion here in America. Um, So I apologize for the quality. I had to scan it into Word, but I'm going to go through it. It's not a long paper because it was my first class. Um, so let's see here. Here's the title. You want to have a title, usually not in your praxis. Don't do a title. But, here's the title. So keeping religious icons separate from government property. So essentially, separation of church and state here. I want you to pay attention to how I word things and my grammar, especially where I place commas, what's capitalized, and the fact that I do not allow what's called run-on sentences. That's a sentence that you should have stopped and rephrased so that it doesn't take 2 or 3 lines to do one sentence. Usually a sentence can be broken down when it's that long. It can be broken down into something much shorter. Um, so let's read this. This is very simple. A basic formula, introduction, body, and then the closing. So, I'll read it. Religious symbols or icons should not be posted on government property because it violates the separation of church and state and shows partiality for certain belief systems. Now, I'll note right here I actually had a grammar area. I'm sorry, actually I didn't. For a certain belief system, I read it wrong, so that was correct. Since colonial times, comma, the American government has worked to specifically keep religion separate from the government, leaving the religious as something to be done in the personal sphere. Sphere is a synonym. I'm trying to sound more intelligent there, but you could use personal realm, personal time, things like that. And I say not displayed in the public one. Again, important. I can do this, but I need that comma there. There is no way to equally divide public display space among religions without showing bias towards one or more. Again, bias is a synonym for favoritism, things like that. Any way you can elevate your English is good. If the government allows the display of religious views, they are sanctioning or accepting, approving a particular belief system. This shows a bias and perhaps prejudice by excluding other groups. This partiality is unjust and therefore religious icons should be kept separate from government property. So let's talk a little bit about the thesis statement. We spoke the other day, and actually mine isn't that great. You see, these are actually my original professor's notes here. I got an A on this paper, which is surely good enough to pass the praxis writing section. But my thesis statement is really just that, is really back here. That right here, the first line here. Religious symbols or icons should not be posted on government property because it violates the separation of church and state and shows partiality for a belief system. That is my belief. That is my thesis, my idea. That's the key. So, but even though that was very direct, I think it was clear. My professor thought that it needed to be a little shorter, a little more precise, and then he says that is to try to extract key issues from these sentences to form a single sentence. See, one sentence. So he wanted me to take really everything in here and make one sentence as my thesis statement. So one sentence for a thesis statement, and then you kind of line up your ideas afterwards, what you're going to present. And I actually did not, in my opinion, do a very good job of that in this. But I wanted to show you something that had some flaws but was still acceptable. So here we go into the body. So posting religious icons on government property goes against the First Amendment, capitalized. Why? Because it is a very important document in the United States, the First Amendment of the Constitution. That needs to be capitalized. You have to pay attention to things like that that are maybe not as well known, like capitalizing names, things like that. You would know to capitalize Constitution, but maybe not the First Amendment. So just pay attention to that stuff. Okay, so First Amendment of the Constitution, which prohibits establishing religion. 1. And then that's my citation there. Now you'll do yours differently. You would want to go ahead and say who said that. You'll see that at the bottom of the page. I'll show you. This is a college paper, so you'll have your citations at the end. And I said, Thomas Jefferson reiterated this point in a letter to the Dansbury Baptist by writing. You see how I tied that in there? So I'm quoting him, and then here it is. Here's the quote. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation of church and state. Again, this is a direct quote, actually, from a letter from Thomas Jefferson, a former president of the United States, and it was easily found, so you definitely have to cite that word for word. You cannot paraphrase. Just make sure that you also use your quotation marks and put a period at the end of the sentence that you're quoting, if there is one. Okay, so then I go on. So I make this statement, and then I develop it a little more with examples, as my professor said here. So you can't just, and that's kind of what I was talking about when I was reading your paper, is you would make a good statement, and then there would be, as you said, about the bones and the fish, right? Well, so we would say there was no meat to your argument, no meat to the paper, So I make this profound statement, a very good quote, one that a lot of people that believe what I believe here would love and it would resonate with them. But if I'm writing to someone who does not believe it, like Josiah, then I need to explain myself a little bit so they understand the background and where I'm coming from. So then I go on. If a municipality, again, that is a synonym for a city or a government of a town, something like that. It's just a synonym, a word that is just used to, has the same meaning as something simpler, but just makes me sound a little more intelligent. If a municipality does display something religious, such as the Ten Commandments or a nativity scene, then they are promoting a religious message, thereby violating the separation, keeping government and religion separate allows for. So I'm making my statements here. So allows for opportunities for all belief systems because the ruling body is not sanctioning one over the other, thereby reducing the possibility of favoritism. So I made my statement, and then I gave the reason why it's important. Okay, that's important to give reasoning. So I'm backing up what I said, not just with a quote, but with a strong idea. Then we go down. Some may argue that, say, I'm acknowledging the other side. That's also important too. Here I'll acknowledge the other side of the argument against me. So some may argue that as long as all religion, I actually made an error here that my professor didn't catch, that all religious groups, it should be, all religions have the ability to represent their ideas, all is fair. However, this does not ensure that those equalities will be upheld. For example, not all groups may know about their right to display or have the same money to display. There may be discrepancy in the space, whether that be the amount of space they were given or the prominence of the position. Not allowing any religious iconography on a government property maintains an equal platform. This leaves room for historical and cultural displays that represent the region, but not the beliefs and values of one specific group. Having an icon or religious representation on government property shows partiality or endorsement of a particular religion or group. So what I did in this section here is I actually further backed up my first statement, about the inequality, but I was slick with it, and I acknowledged the other side and actually used their argument against them. And this is what they want. When they say write an argument paper, they want you to take a stance. We'll continue. So the democratic government of the United States is meant to represent all people. If the government shows favor to one religion by allowing that group to post a religious symbol, then quite possibly the ideas in those symbols are not representing the ideas and views of the people that the municipality represents as a whole. For example, there have been instances where the Ten Commandments were posted in a courthouse. Again, that number 3 is a citation. Although the general ideas of Judeo-Christian morality are found within the Ten Commandments, it comes from the story of God writing on tablets of stone. Those of other belief systems may resent having what they consider a fictitious history being portrayed as truth on the walls of a government building. Morals being described may be accepted as positive values to exemplify, but they originate from a book that not all may believe or accept. If the views and beliefs of one group are being shown more prominently than another group, inequality reigns. So again, what I'm doing is showing here that I'm showing the other side. I'm showing that there are good things that may come from this, but overall it's negative. And that's a good thing in an argument paper. If you can take the other side of the argument and present that, it makes you seem more educated, more knowledgeable about the topic you're arguing for, and actually helps to drive home your point. And that's what they want when you make a statement, you do an argument paper on the praxis. They want you to take those kind of views. So, we'll finish up here quite soon. I said, when church and state, this is the closing, okay? So I'm going to try to tie it all back together. So when church and state are not separated and religious iconography is allowed on government property, it allows partiality and favoritism. Keeping religious displays in the private sector and detached from government allows all groups to be equal in their worship. It also allows them to be comfortable with the idea that the views of other religious groups are not being endorsed or favored politically over theirs. If a government entity allows display of religion and keeps it open to all religions, this still brings up the reality that the space may not be equal in size, prominence, or availability. When religious symbols are displayed on government property, it may make citizens feel as if their religion or belief is not as significant as others. Therefore, religious symbols should be kept separate from the state. Now, I'll be the first to admit that this is not the perfect essay. It was my first college class, actually. First paper I ever turned in. And even with an A, I feel that it didn't have enough, but we were only required to write 3 pages, so that's what I did. I took the easy way out, but it still shows the basics of writing a college paper. You saw my introduction of the issue, and then the body, which had quotes and citations and ideas to support it. And then down here at the bottom, you see that I tied it all back together to where I started. I didn't actually give any more examples in the closing, but I just kind of restated in a different way everything I had said during the paper, and then I ended it with a simplified version of my thesis statement right here. Therefore, religious symbols should be kept separate from the state. So, and then down here, you're going to see, and this is actually MLA format. Back then, that's what we were using in that English class. So you're going to see these quotes, these citations here from whatever I quoted at the time. So if you have any questions, I'd read over this and try to get an idea for where I was going. And if you have any questions about how to organize a paper, we could probably work on that a bit more. And practice maybe writing thesis statements also. Let me know how your weekend went and if you plan on doing that college class over the summer. I look forward to hearing from you.